you see the life. You are doing your own life. You are with people. You have a lot of relationships. And somehow, slowly, something happening which is inspiring you. And then you are transforming yourself and sharing with the people. Of course, the way how you have to do this, you are using camera or you are, it doesn't matter what are you using. This, it's just a kind of creativity because you want to participate in the life. You want to tell the people how do you see the things. And this is your reaction. And let's say
Béla.
it's a kind of exhibitionism.
Thanks, Béla. Sorry, can I?
Kind of.
Yeah, thanks. It's difficult to get him to shut up sometimes. That obviously was the voice of Béla Tarr, probably Hungary's greatest living director, maybe even for even very deep cut cinephiles. I shudder at using that word. Even deep cut cinephiles, cineasts. Perhaps Hungary's greatest ever director, living or dead. I think certainly the most notorious in some senses. He is a filmmaker whose reputation is sometimes swallowed by their form, by their formal practice. I mean here his horror at fast cuts, his horror at brevity. We can quibble with those things because Tarr has a mature late style and an early style. But, for most people, when they think about Béla Tarr, they're like, Béla Tarr is a maker of black and white, often quite stark, quite bleak films shot in desperate places, rural places, not as a kind of pastoral, but as a kind of anti-pastoral. And they are slow and they're long, and they are abstruse and difficult. And those things are true up to a point. And the reason I opened up with that clip, that interview, at the very beginning, is because Tarr is talking about his film practice and really talking about any form of creativity as being a way to express your view of the world, your worldview, your ontology. And I think one of the things that comes across there, right, is Tarr talking about life and humanity, and the alluding to things like dignity, human dignity. And we could say that his films, on a surface reading, don't really display that. They're austere and often quite cruel. That's why I wanted to do this mini episode. Kind of ironically, I want to do a really short episode on Béla Tarr, and I want to do it particularly on Sátántangó, which is his perhaps magnum opus in some ways. It's not always the film that people choose as the best Béla Tarr film. People might say that Werkmeister Harmonies is a superior film. That's only 2.5 hours. This is a 7.5 hour film. I saw it quite a long time ago, and I think in a really distracted way and in quite a fragmented way. This time around, I actually watched it in two parts and two chunks, two legs, of equal size, duration. The first part I watched, I came back on Saturday night from a kind of party, and I was at a completely opposite kind of space. I was at Village Underground in London, and it was this really leery, intense, blokey night. I came back and I was still a bit wired and restless, I think. It must have been about 3 a.m. and I watched the first kind of half of it on the sofa in this kind of state of rapt attention, which is not what you think of Béla Tarr, you know, or Sátántangó in particular, because it's off-putting, this stark, bleak monument, this wall of film, 7.5 hours. Famously, it's composed of 156 shots, for those people keeping count. Béla Tarr himself says about 150 shots, but it's 156. You can make your soy face now if you want. All those Kubrick stands out there. And it's, you know, in terms of the fabula, in terms of the story itself, it is really important. Again, the form complements and it interacts and engages with the content in a really interesting way in these films, because they're inseparable. The film couldn't be shorter, nor could it be longer. It's the exact right amount of time, 7.5 hours. I think the comparison that struck me on the first viewing and again on the second was actually Gogol. So Russian 19th century author, famed for Dead Souls, Mrtvé duše, which is similarly about, you know, a bleak kind of rural place that's been a bit forgotten, and about a unusual figure who arrives in that town and kind of upsets its equilibrium, kind of blows the dust off the mantelpieces, so to speak. In Dead Souls, that's Shishikov, and they're the kind of allusion to this sneeze with his name Shishikov is kind of intentional. There's a lot of like these bodied metaphors about the how people are described and named in the film. But he's a bit of a trickster and a huckster, who's got this harebrained scheme about buying, as it were, deceased peasants off landowners, because the census hasn't been taken yet. So by buying them before the census has been taken, he can kind of artificially inflate his value, his wealth. Eventually he's kind of run out of town in the end. It all becomes this tumbling metaphor for the state of Russia and where Russia is going, you know, the big, the Slavophile question, what is to be done with that shit, kind of propelled by Chernyshevsky and all those people. But the most interesting thing obviously about Dead Souls is not that stuff. It's the kind of his interaction with these landowners and these peasants, these ugly and poor people. And I'm using Béla Tarr's words there, and he uses it in a very kindly way. You know, Béla Tarr's first forays into film with these kind of very socialist, realist, tight-framed, more conventional films. They used colour, this mature style that evolved in tandem with the emergence of this more almost like collaborative practice that he pursued, working very closely with Laszlo Krasznokaj, who's an author who has provided all his scripts since Damnation in 1988. Also with Mihaly Vig, who is a musician and is also an actor. He plays Irmayash in Sátántangó. Also Agnes Chranitsky, who is his wife and long-term editor, collaborator. Gabor Medvegi, who is a cinematographer. So when he talks about his work and his films, he says that this is really all of their film. It's a collaborative, collective work. I'm not going to read too much into that. This isn't this kind of activist filmmaking. It's just how he sees it. But ultimately, yeah, you know, Béla Tarr is the name you remember. He is the driving engine and the vision behind this mature filmmaking style since Damnation. He's retired now, actually. He's moved on to installation and teaching, and he says he's made his films. He's made the films he's going to make. I respect that. Respect to you, Béla. But yeah, the film itself, I mean, like Dead Souls, is about a crumbling, dropsical, forgotten place, a collective farm at the transition, at the end of communism. There's a scheme afoot. people have sold the cattle in the village. I believe that's the general vibe. There's money that they've shared around. There kind of might be a slightly illegal transaction going on. People try and backstab and try and trick each other out of the money. Amidst all of this, Jeremias returns to the village. He left about a year and a half ago. There are rumours that he spread that he died. He arrives with a friend, a kind of collaborator. This kind of Beckettian couple called Petrina. So these two people, and they've got this little lackey, this kid in the village. He's pretty much the only young person apart from another character, Estike. And they return to the village, and everyone is terrified of them for unspecified reasons. He's a bit of a demagogue. He's actually a police informer. He uses a crisis in the village, which is the death of Estika, a child who poisons herself with rat poison, tortures her cat in a very famously controversial scene, right? It's really hard to watch as a cat owner. As a human, it's hard to watch. She poisons herself. The village sees it as their failure to care and to nurture. Jeremias returns to the village and chastises them at the funeral, at this wake, after they spent the night drinking and dancing in a miraculous bar scene. And Béla Tarr, I was speaking to George Macbeth, who was, appeared on our last episode to talk about Kluge, and was saying, he's known for these incredible bar scenes, and they've all got their own distinct energy to them, but he loves this collective movement of bodies and different actors spiraling on their own rhythm, and that's why his long cuts, some of which are 2.5 minutes long, some of which are 7 minutes long, invite you to look into these scenes and to, in an embodied way, feel them, and to observe, and you go from this initial frustration to this attentiveness, and this paying attention is what happens. And really it is about people, the demands that people make of other people, their dreams and their hopes, and how those are frustrated by the Great Wall, the indecipherable, ambiguous wall and flood of history. Now I think when you read about Béla Tarr, there's a book by Jacques Rancière called The Time After, and he says, He says, Hungarian filmmaker Béla Tarr has followed the collapse of the communist. His work follows the collapse of the communist promise. The time after is the time when we are less interested in histories and their successes or failures than we are in the delicate fabric of time from which they are carved. And I think that's true to an extent, but that kind of depersonalizes and disembodies his film from real people who want and need the life that Béla Tarr was talking about in that interview at the very top of the episode, right? And he's saying, this is about life, it's about showing my worldview. And I think these books that are about these bigger things like time and space and history, that's good, and it's a good way of talking about Béla Tarr, but they risk flattening and obliterating the people that are in them, which is really the heart of his film, I think. Because these people are, or maybe a better way to put it is that history it's like the longue durée, that history is a bigger anonymous process, but it's fueled by tiny behaviours and actions and wants and needs and desires. And in the film, these people are, as it were, making history, even as they are left in the dust by it, even as they are disarticulated by it. And it's, obviously there's a lot of things in the film that are ambiguous and unresolved. Estika, why does she kill herself? Why does she torture the cat? Is it because she's been neglected? Is she mentally ill? Is she taking revenge against something or somebody? What motivates that? You don't know. There's another plot where Jeremias and Petrina are trying to buy explosives. You don't know why. You don't know why the character they call the doctor, who's I think, the village doctor, whatever, why he won't and can't leave his house. There's a lot of unresolvedness and cruelty and indifference, but there's also a lot of love. And the scenes when the people are in the bar, this togetherness emerges, this embodied feeling of collectivity kind of emerges. And I think for Tarr, he kind of likes to roil and roll around in the ambiguity and the ambivalence of human need and human sociality and togetherness and collectives, and I think that's what he does really well. So yeah, around Sierra, you're kind of right, but it's bigger than this. We're talking about humanity here and dignity, and what people might do when they have no dignity and when they have hope. You know, the people in the village go along with Irmayash. He returns, this Jesus-like figure, this Christ-like figure who returns to the village and takes their money from them on this harebrained scheme that he's set up a new collective farm where they will look out for each other's destiny and future together. And this is where, you know, they go along with it and they realize they've been conned by this silver-tongued, he calls himself a partisan, you know, funnily enough, not to them, but to Petrone, he calls himself a partisan. But they need someone to tell them where to go. They follow him like sheep, and this is where it invites the historical analysis. You know, this is a collective farm at the end of communism in Hungary. People are desperate and confused. A new order is entering, a new order that may again push them to the side and destroy them, even as it promises to free them. And I think that rhythm to the film and those readings are really important, but also, yeah, it is about people and their wants and their dreams. There is a scene when they have spent their first night, as it were, in this new collective farm, a place called Almash, which is the village over, and they walk to it because they don't have cars, stranded by history, you know. They spend the night there and the camera pans over them, circles over them, and we hear the narrator talk about their dreams. Some of these dreams are dreams of great comfort and beauty, and some of them dreams of panic and uncertainty. And we get this insight into these fragile, needy people. And there's a moment of real softness, and it's a softness that is displayed in Werkmeister Harmonies at the very beginning of that, where a figure dances in this beautiful way with a group of villagers in a bar, and he gets them to reconstruct the solar system, planets of the solar system. They move in these orbits around each other, and it's an incredible choreography. And this, again, it's deep tenderness, even in this kind of alien and off-putting world. You know, he's got a very mucky camera, indefinite. I mean, part of that might be the way it's shot. I hear that the restoration of Damnation, this 4K restoration, is really sharp, and I've seen little bits of it. It's very sharp, but at the same time, it's not to forget this is chiaroscuro. There's great pockets of darkness and depth and muddiness in his films, even when restored. And yeah, of course, he evacuates the world of color. It pushes it out of history. It squeezes it out of history. It flattens it in a way, but also adds this great depth and texture, and poses questions that have no answer. Estika's death and her torture of the cat being one of those. And I think, you see elements of the state and of authority and conventional social hierarchies and structures, the police and the police chief, and his talk of a local town, but we don't really see the town. At the very end, Doctor, he was abandoned by the villagers, actually, left behind. He did not make it to the moving of the village. He returns, wakes up, and nobody's there. There's only one madman banging a bell in a church tower. Screaming about it. The Turks are coming. Fear of the distant, horrifying other that's going to come and sweep through the country. He goes back to his desk and writes in complete darkness almost. There is a structural integrity to this film. It follows a series of, I believe, it might be 12 kind of almost episodes, some of which share similar names. 12 parts to title. And like a tango, they go backwards and forwards. 6 moves forward, 6 back. It returns, at the very end, the circle closes. That core bejaru, the circle closes the final part. And it closes the circle of the film because it's just the teacher at the beginning again. He's He's one of the very early first characters we see. Might even be the first. And actually the first part, Ahir Hoji Jonek. The news is they are coming. There's your circle again. There is the man banging the bell. The Turks are coming. Originally, the news is they are coming. You think might refer to Iramayash and Petrina. Again, ambiguities that spool out of each other. This is a tight, contained nucleus, but it's also an exploded universe. I think that's very, very special. I mean, a lot of people talk about this initial opening shot of the cows leaving the cow shed, and the camera pans around and watches them. There's no people here. It's evacuated of people. This is, we kind of stitched together that this is maybe what people have sold. Sold to who? There's no one there receiving this cattle. But the animals we see just as themselves. Tarr and people who talk about Tarr say, he's a hard realist. A spoon is a spoon, a cow is a cow. Yes, but it reaches a transcendence through that. The cattle are so much cattle in this moment that they kind of, you go beyond just seeing it as this is a scene where that is establishing a moment. This is a farm. It's beyond that. We see the cattle unto themselves. I think that's one of the really powerful things about his work. It's definitely got me on like a Tarr kick right now, because I'm like Amazon basket, dumped a load of Blu-rays and DVDs in there, because at the moment I'm going off rentals, and I'm kind of looking forward to plunging back in. I think I don't know what changed over the last year, where I was like, I really could sit down. The only reason I stopped viewing on Saturday night was because it was like 6:30 in the morning. I'd run out of beer, and I thought I should probably go to bed because it was light. But I could easily have just sat there watching the remaining time. At the beginning of this episode, I was actually playing Macaulay Vig's part of Macaulay Vig's soundtrack, a track called Rain 2, which is the most prominent musical theme and signature in the entire film. You get this kind of some diegetic sound, bells clanging, feet in muck, but it's very sparse, and the sparseness resonates, just in the way that the sparseness of the shots resonates, and the sparseness of the things you're seeing resonate. And there's so much to say. This is the thing, I'm trying to reconstruct the film as I talk about it now, and it's really, really hard to recall things because so much does happen. At one point, there's the anger of the bar owner because nobody pays for their drinks and they stay up all night not paying for drinks and drinking him dry. He's kind of left behind as well because his source of business, the villagers, leave. There is the report that Iramayash sends to the police chief, which they rewrite. There is the fact that Iramayash he scatters the villagers around the towns and villages and places around, saying they must wait dormant for the time to come when the commune will happen. Again, it's delayed future, this delayed promise. The great thing is going to happen, the resurrection almost. And I think it invites a kind of Christian eschatology in a way, even though it's a very secular film. I've been talking for quite a long time already, for a very long time. But we're comfortable with long 7.5 hour things, aren't we? My other, I made it to the cinema last night. Props to Castle Cinema in Homerton, to go and see Vinterberg's new film, Druk, Another Round. It's right. It doesn't have the teeth of The Hunt or the concentrated structure of Hunt. It's very much a looser. It's a nice film. I was in a sort of down mood, and it's one of those films that kind of spoon feeds you your emotions. Now you feel happy. Now you feel sad. Now you'll laugh. Now you'll cry. Perfectly serviceable. But it's interesting how a long way that Vinterberg has fallen from the tree of Festen and Dogma 95. But whatever. I was happy to shell over a few quid. Sit in a dark room, have the waves of the film rush over me. that might close the circle right now. That's going to close the circle. So far, they're coming. Who are they? Well, it's Owen and Ralph. We're going to be back soon with the next episode. As again, we're moving to this system where we're doing these smaller one-off episodes, often a monologue for myself or Ralph, sometimes together, and then these bigger, deeper episodes like the Alexander Klug episode. We'll often have a guest. What our aim is to do is to finish our Godard season, which is episode 4, which is late Godard image book and film socialism, which we want to look at. Daniel Neofitu, friend of the pod, will be joining us to talk about that. In the meantime, I'm going to drop Rain 2 on again, which might even be playing now because I still need to add it in the mix, and I will hear from you soon. You will hear from me soon. As ever, tell us what you want us to talk about on the pods, recommendations, suggestions. Have I missed a really key reading about Sátántangó? Do I care? Do I give a shit? Maybe not. Maybe not. But I recommend you watch it and stay frosty, as they say.